Well, it appears Congress is going home without extending any of the Bush tax cuts. In an incredibly transparent moment, California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein told the Daily Caller, quote, "I don't know who takes a tax vote in their right mind just before an election, but that's just me." Isn't she basically admitting that you just wait until after elections and then raise people's taxes? Our freedom fighters know the score. Political scientist Carolyn Heldman, Cato Institute senior fellow Dan Mitchell, and my friend and Fox colleague Charlie Gasparino, author of the not yet out but soon available in bookstores, Bought and Paid For, The Unholy Alliance Between Barack Obama and Wall Street. Charlie, Senator Feinstein seemed to be all but admitting that taxes are going to go up, or the Bush tax cuts, or a portion of them will die after Election Day.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that's what's in the writing. Listen, Obama is not going to sign on to extending the Bush tax rates, which would be keeping these current rates as they are right now. So I almost think this is a fait accompli at this point.
Carolyn, why have 38 members of the House of Representatives who are Democrats and 6 members of the United States Senate who are Democrats said to the president they want the Bush tax cuts to stay in place for everyone? Stated differently, why are many Democrats running away from the president on taxes?
Well, because it's an election year, Judge. Otherwise, there's no way they would be supporting extending the Bush tax cuts for the top 2%. It's a terrible idea for the economy. I can see extending it for Americans, middle-class Americans, because they will immediately spend that money. But there are much, much better uses if we want to stimulate the economy.
Carolyn,
much better uses of that money than extending the tax cuts on the top 2%.
You're the professor,
yes,
and I'm one of her students. Professor, shouldn't the elected representatives do what the people want, rather than wait until after Election Day and then do what they know the people don't want, like raising taxes?
Well, Judge, if we're going to use that logic, then a slight majority of Americans do not want the tax cuts extended to the top 2% of Americans.
It depends on how you ask that question.
Tax cuts for the top. Tax cuts for the top.
There are a number of polls showing
it depends on Carolyn. It depends on how you ask that question.
Of course it does, because you can tweak the answers to a poll by the way you ask the questions. We all know that. Dan, tax cuts for the top 2% of wage earners. If the tax cuts go and the top 2% of wage earners are made to pay more in taxes, what will that do to the economy in general during a recession?
Let's remember the top 2%. Who are they? There are the investors and the entrepreneurs. That's where you get the big supply side response. I don't want to sound like a boring economist and talk about elasticities of income and stuff like that, but let's just be clear about one thing. If you punish people for working, saving, and investing, they're going to work, save, and invest less. And this is why countries like France and Greece grow a lot slower than places like Hong Kong.
And let's be clear here. Economists aren't saying that extending the Bush tax cuts is bad for the economy. There is not a consensus of economists who say that this is bad. The consensus is saying if you destimulate the economy by raising taxes, it is bad at this point. That's why Democrats are running away from it. There is not, Carolyn, you're wrong. There is not a consensus that somehow raising taxes right now is a good thing for the economy. Where are you getting that from?
Wouldn't it be better in a recession, Carolyn? Wouldn't it be better in a recession if people had more money to invest or to save or to risk rather than giving it to the government? Just as a matter of basic economics 101. In a recession, don't you want people to have more money?
Absolutely, Judge, except that wealthy people, the top 2%, actually don't spend money during a recession.
What do they do with it? They put it in a mattress? What do they do? They do good things with it. They spend it, they invest it, they put it back in their businesses. This is what they do. They don't put it in a mattress.
They save it at much higher rates. They save it at much higher rates
money in the stock market, which means it goes up. It helps the pensions for teachers and firemen.
I think Charlie's argument is a sound one. Unless they put it in a shoebox, whatever they do with it is going to help the economy.
It's better than what the government's going to do with it.
The problem is we have to take the whole Keynesian construct and throw it out the window. There's nothing wrong with saving. then there's nothing wrong with consumption either. But the reason we have an economic downturn is because we're not earning enough income. That's what we need to focus on. That's why we want lower marginal tax rates on work, saving, and investing. Let's not focus on trying to redistribute to people who consume instead of people who save, because that's simply
just think about how absurd. Just think about how absurd this debate is, and that's why the president. This is such a losing debate for the Democrats.
Why?
They want to raise taxes on people, the entrepreneurs, the small business people, the people that actually spend money. You go to any bar
2%,
right now. Let me tell you
Charlie.
something. You go to any
2% of
bar.
small
Listen,
businesses.
poor people did not keep my father employed as a bartender. They did not tip my father. It's the rich guy that tips him. It's the rich guy that builds the boat.
Hang on, Charlie. Carolyn, why do the Democrats want to punish the rich and punish the successful?
Well, it's not an issue of punishing. It's an issue of deficit reduction, and it's an issue of untimely
this
tax
money is not going to deficit reduction. See, that would be great if they would just reduce the deficit. They're going to spend it. That's the problem.
Stay with us during the break. This month marks 6 months since the president signed the health care bill into law. One of the many disturbing overlooked provisions in it is the rule that any business spending more than $600, that's writing any check for $600, has to fill out a 1099 form explaining the expense. Is this government really trying to stifle small business with bureaucracy? Back with our freedom fighters panel, Heldman, Mitchell, and Gasparino. Carolyn, why should the government add this incredible expense to every business, from General Motors, which it owns, to mom and pop around the corner, barely eking out a living, that they have to file a form with the IRS every time they write a check for more than $600?
Well, not every time they write a check, but to every vendor for whom they write over $600 or spend over $600 with. You know, Judge, when I ran small businesses, filling out a few additional 1099 forms does not constitute a jobs killer,
Carolyn,
and it keeps them honest.
Carolyn,
because
see, that's the problem.
Are not being honest.
Carolyn just explained the problem to your viewers about the liberal mindset. It keeps the small businessmen honest. They really do believe there is a mindset in this country among the left. They really do believe that businessmen are crooks. Why do we need to know that little bit of information? You just said it, Carolyn.
That's a broad brush.
You just said it keeps them honest.
Well, it does keep them honest. That's the whole point. That is the whole point.
This is going to generate 100 million pieces of paper, Dan, filed with the IRS. Question, what will keep the IRS and the Congress honest?
Well, that's the fundamental question, because we have a federal government that, in effect, is stealing the American people blind in order to buy votes with our money. And every time they think that, oh, my goodness, tax compliance isn't 100%, their notion is to turn the thumb screws up and grab the American people around the neck. Why not lower tax rates?
And Harry Reid to fill out some of those 1099s.
Do you know where this
all the economic evidence is that the best way you improve compliance is by lowering tax rates. There's not much tax cheating in Hong Kong because the system is low, flat, and fair.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of tax cheating over in France and Greece.
All right. Let me switch gears slightly. As annoying as this is, as annoying as income taxes may be, things are actually getting scarier in the UK. Did the three of you hear about this? Did you hear about this? The United Kingdom Collection Authority, that's their IRS, is proposing that citizens surrender their entire paychecks to the government, and the government will then send the citizens that portion which is theirs after taxes. Is that coming here, Professor Heldman?
Well, I certainly hope not, Judge. There is no reason to tinker with the system that, for all intents and purposes, works. The idea that we would have this massive new bureaucracy, expensive and unnecessary, just doesn't make sense.
Oh, it doesn't make sense? We're moving in that direction every day.
Doesn't the whole...
I mean, it makes sense that we're moving there. I mean, I'm not saying it makes sense that we should be doing this, but clearly that is a direction we're going.
Dan, doesn't the whole concept of an income tax, the government deciding what portion of your income to take, presume that we work for the government, that it owns our property, and that it decides what we can keep? And if that's so, isn't that the opposite of the founding values of this country?
our founding fathers would be rolling over in their grave if they knew we had an income tax today. What we're seeing in England is going to come to America. And I bet Professor Heldman, 10 years from now, will all be sitting on this panel, and she'll be defending this, just like she's defending this $600 1099 withholding thing. Once we gave the politicians the power with the 16th Amendment to take our money, the politicians decided it's their money, and that's exactly what is happening in the United Kingdom.
Charlie Gasparino, Carolyn Heldman, Dan Mitchell, thanks very much for joining us.